This is an update that Blizzard has made about the upcoming expansion, Shadowlands. In 7 weeks, brave heroes of Azeroth will venture into the Shadowlands to confront the forces of the mysterious Jailer and discover the nature of Warcraft's afterlife. I know what Warcraft's afterlife is. It's Final Fantasy XIV. As our development shifts from implementation to new designs to content towards polish and tuning the world we have crafted, I would like to offer a roadmap for what to expect over the coming weeks on our beta servers. Introducing 9.0.2. First, on a technical note, nobody gives a fuck. Scrolling down there. Alt leveling. As we first announced at BlizzCon last year, while everyone's first trip through the Shadowlands is driven by a linear narrative campaign that grants access to in-game features such as Covenants, World Quests, and more, we want to offer players who are leveling alts a much more flexible experience. We have had the version of that experience available in beta for a few weeks, as the alts select their Covenant immediately upon providing of Oribos, and then they can tackle the 4 zones in any order they choose. However, we've received a couple of points of feedback that have led us to refine this approach. First, a number of testers felt like they weren't necessarily ready to pick a Covenant right away on a new class and wish they could replay the narrative arc that let them test drive each of the active abilities along the way. Very good choice that they did this, and I'm very glad this happened. This is a very, very good decision they're making here. Second, for players who even for players who are familiar with the overall story by that point, it felt confusing or wrong to play through portions of some zone campaigns out of order or while already a member of a Covenant. For example, you doing the main Rivendreth arc whenever you're already a member of Renthil's Venthyr. Yeah, I could see that. In this week's build, alts emerging from the Maw for the first time, we met in Oribos with the mysterious Fate Scribe, who offers an explicit choice between replaying the narrative arc as the first time characters experienced it, or following the threads of fate to their inevitable conclusion and beginning the journey at a point following the climactic events at the end of Rivendreth's story. Characters choosing the latter option will enter the Shadowlands in a state where the entire narrative campaign has been already completed, and with bonus objectives available in locations that were previously central to the campaign. Lucrative zone-wide objectives for each of the 4 zones will provide additional structure while allowing alts to roam the Shadowlands as they prefer, earning gear and experience through their choice of zones, side quests, bonus objectives, world quests, dungeons, or rares and oh my god! They're making rares and treasures give more experience. That's fucking awesome. This is amazing. I'm happy. This is great. This is what we want to hear about. Our goal with this alt experience remains offering more flexibility than ever before on repeat playthroughs, while also allowing alts to begin making their progress towards their endgame goals, earning anima for their Covenant's reservoir or catching up on renown so they can hit the ground running whenever they hit 60. We look forward to hearing feedback on how the new experience feels. Well, we'll find out. So, Torghast progression. A number of players in the past few months on beta have raised concerns about what seemed to be like an excessively lengthy introductory quest lines in Torghast, which could at their worst feel like 5 or 6 successive tutorials that had to be completed before players were able to access the real feature. In a coming build, likely next week, we're restructuring the way that Torghast is unlocked, such that players can gain full access to the main wings of the tower after completing just a single introductory run that also grants access to the Rune Carver. The remaining quest to locate Jaina and rescue Thrall will be incorporated into a larger quest line, spoiler by the way, that spans 6 main Torghast cell blocks, rewarding legendary crafting mats and eventually unlocking the Twisting Corridors section at its conclusion. That is a good decision. I like that. This is an improvement, and I don't think you want to go through 6 tutorials either. It's a very good decision. Speaking of Twisting Corridors, as we finalize tuning, Twisting Corridors should come into its own as the challenge mode wing of Torghast, offering 18-4 runs at a higher level of difficulty than the rest of Torghast, with cosmetic rewards for clearing certain thresholds. I like to hear that. Covenants are the centerpiece of... Oh, here's the cock, okay? Here is the cock. Get ready. Covenants are the centerpiece of Shadowlands, and they have been the subject of passionate discourse across the community for over the past weeks, which has been mirrored by discussion and debate within our team. From the system's first conception, selecting a covenant was crafted to be a weighty decision, shaping a character's abilities, cosmetic rewards, and access to in-game story arcs and sanctum systems. A wealthy decision, a weighty decision even, almost by definition comes with some amount of stress, whether anxiety about making the wrong choice or just evaluating various pros and cons and wishing there were a way to just get the best of all worlds. In designing this system, we've done what we can to minimize the burden of regret. Those measures should be fully enabled by next week's beta release. While picking a covenant at the end of your journey to max level is a weighty choice, it is not a permanent one. If you find that, for whatever reason, you are unhappy with your initial covenant pick at level 60, you need only return to Oribos and you can immediately switch to another one. Now, if you later wish to rejoin a covenant that you have left, that is slightly more involved. There is a path of redemption consisting of a series of 2 weekly quests to atone for breaking your vow to rededicate yourself to that covenant's cause. These quests are available in testing for betas. They're still being tuned, but the intent is that they are largely ceremonial rather than feeling like an arduous grind. We've taken, we'll talk about, it's fucking stupid. This is like, it's another arbitrary number. This is the same thing of what happened with, what do you call it? Yeah, I just want to play the game. Like, I would be okay. Like, I wouldn't be okay. I'd be more okay with it if, like, there was, like, another way for, like, more of a grind to where you could do it immediately. So, like, let's say you do one and you don't like your choice, and you're like, okay, well, fuck, I want to go back and try another one, and you just want to grind for a couple of hours and say, all right, fuck it, I'll just go change it right now. I think that'd be fine. I'd be completely good with that. I don't know why they don't just do that. It's not a grind if you do it immediately. Well, these are basically, no, these are time-gated world quests that are basically used to throttle the player from swapping covenants too quickly or anything like that. That's basically what this is. Let's just be real here. We've also taken steps to ensure that a player who switches covenants, as well as one who reaches max level later on in the expansion, never feels permanently behind as a result. Renown measures the strength of a player's connection to their covenant and is the main vehicle for unlocking additional soulbind rewards and various covenant perks and rewards. Players primarily earn renown via weekly quests to gather anima from across the Shadowlands and rescue souls from the maw and restore them to their rightful place in the covenant. If a player has missed any of those quests, however, they will find that they can earn renown directly through a range of activities such as dungeons, world quests, mythic, PvP, until they're fully caught up. The system will be functional in beta in the coming weeks. In short, a player who regrets their covenant choice and who wants to change their mind should be able to do so straightforwardly at any point during the expansion, and will be able to reach a state with no long-term drawbacks or disadvantages compared to someone who has been in that covenant all along. That's nice, but it's the fact that you can't just go back and forth. Like, it's straightforward, but it's not straightforward. It's a long, winding path that takes 14 days. Like, it's straightforward. Like, you just click the button, but then you wait for a week. Like, yes, it is straightforward, but it's disingenuous to say that because that's not the problem. People weren't worried about it being confusing. They were worried about it taking a long time. Like, this is crazy. It's 2 weekly quests, not 2 weeks. Well, let me read it again. So 2 weekly quests to atone. So so what you're saying is you believe that the 2 weekly quests can be completed simultaneously on the same week? You know what? Maybe that's true. Maybe you're right. I hope you're right. Maybe that's right. I don't know. I think it's going to be 2 weeks. Because, so here's logically why I've arrived at that conclusion. So conduits are a 1 week cooldown. And by any measure, conduits are less impactful and less meaningful in a decision-making, like, fucking RPG perspective than your covenants. So if the conduits are only 1 week, are the covenants also going to just be 1 week? I think for Blizzard's thinking, they would probably make it to 2 weeks. No, I don't know. It's unclear. But that's what I'm assuming, based off of what they've done before with conduits. So let's go back and we'll get the rest of this. Okay, let's see here. We've also heard from players who are rather than being worried about regretting their choice would prefer that they not have to choose at all. They have advocated that we offer a way to switch among the various active abilities offered by the Covenants without friction. But these Covenant systems are thoroughly intertwined. Covenant abilities are often modified by Covenant-specific conduits and soulbinds. Most of those soulbinds in turn are unlocked through Covenant-specific narrative campaigns. Granting access to one of these without the others would lead to an incomplete or confusing result. What? Why? This is like players can't find PvP vendors. Like, I just... in short, pulling on that thread, or cord as it were, would unravel the entire fabric of the system. Even so, we would embrace the work required to rebuild the Covenant system along those lines if we agreed that it would be an improvement, but ultimately we do not share that view. So they're going to stick around with the Covenant system they have now. So, you guys excited for 9.3? That's good. Before starting an arena match, engaging a raid boss, or entering a dungeon, a character in Shadowlands can change their specialization, talents, legendary items, other equipment, active soulbind, and chosen path within the soulbind. Whenever it comes to customizing your loadout, the set of tools that you're going to take into a given encounter, WoW offers more options than ever before, and you can almost entirely reshape your character on the fly to suit that moment. But as malleable as those choices are, none of them, other than perhaps your specialization, defines your character. They aren't who you are, but rather what you happen to be doing at any moment. Okay. Rather than add another layer of that decision matrix, we're trying to do something different here and let players more meaningfully define their character's identity and set themselves apart from others who play the same class. It's not set themselves apart, it's set themselves above or below. That's what they don't understand. Like, it's not about setting yourself apart, it's about being at a disadvantage. It's so stupid. Let me read the rest of this. And that identity entails a blend of aesthetic preference, narrative experiences, and mechanical strengths and weaknesses. From the earliest sketch designs of the Covenant system, our goal was for the answer to what do you play in Shadowlands to be Kyrian Paladin or Venthyr Paladin than just Paladin. And given the central role of combat and power progression in World of Warcraft as a whole, achieving that goal for most players requires that there be player power implications on that Covenant choice. So this is exactly what I was expecting. I think that Blizzard they've created this narrative in their own minds of their vision of what they want the game to look like. And it doesn't matter what the players think. It doesn't matter what the feedback is, because they're just going to fulfill that vision at the expense of the enjoyment of the players. And I think that's basically what's happening here. I think that it's obvious that they sat around and they've thought about this a lot. And this is the same team that thought of corruptions. This is the same team that thought of Legion legendaries. If you think that I have any faith at all in their ability to correctly make decisions and assess what the player base wants and how to accurately fill that need in the game, you're completely wrong. Like, I don't think that they have any idea what they're doing here. I think that they're completely just fucking inventing these things, and they're creating imaginary problems for themselves to solve because it makes them feel good as game developers, because they think that somehow they're going to invent some system that's going to subvert human fucking psychology. It's not going to. It's just going to complain. It's just going to confuse people and piss them off. None of this. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep going. I don't agree with them. I like Covenants the way they are. Yeah, there are a lot of people who like Covenants the way they are, right? I get that there are a lot of people that like that. But is there a reason for them to be the way they are in terms of gameplay? Does it make the gameplay better? I don't think so. Like, it might make the lore better or something like that, but I don't think that it makes the gameplay better at all. I think that it makes it worse, a lot worse. You guys can disagree with me, that's fine. But let's see here. I'll read the rest of this. If you really want to go Kyrian on your rogue, but you can't justify it because every guide currently says that the Necrolord's serrated bone spike is too good for you to pass up, or if an otherwise appealing covenant has benefits that seem relevant in PvP, these are exactly the sorts of imbalance that we want to fix, and your feedback is essential to that process. In the coming weeks, well, how do you balance a teleport and an absorb shield? Like, how do you balance those two things? I don't understand. Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot to read this paragraph. I skipped the paragraph. My apologies. None of this is to say that the development on covenants and their powers is finished, or we are not open to further changes. Far from it. We understand that when we decide to offer a choice between completing packages of strengths and weaknesses, if we're not careful, especially given the social and community pressures, weaknesses can easily overshadow strengths. The satisfaction of having an edge in one type of content doesn't make up for the frustration of being excluded entirely from participating in another. But while tearing down the entire system may seem like the simplest way to avoid that pitfall, we're committing to working with the community and ensuring that players feel viable regardless of their covenant choice. This is such a stupid decision. Like, this is exactly what happened with Azerite gear at the beginning of BFA. Like, Azerite gear, Blizzard's vision of Azerite gear was that players would have to work really hard to get it. It would be very unique and very special, and you couldn't even trade the Azerite gear at all. And what ended up happening is you had people that had Thunderous Blast Azerite gear pieces doing more damage than anybody else in the game because of a completely random drop that they had no control over that would sometimes just appear in their Mythic Plus cache with a high item level that's way better than anything else in the game. And then finally, the only time that Azerite gear was fixed is whenever they gave people the tools to correctly go after the Azerite pieces that they wanted. And at this point in time, I don't like how Azerite gear takes up 3 slots. I think that's boring, but I like the idea of Azerite gear, and they actually improved it to make it a better system because they listened to the players whenever the players were telling them something that they got feedback for in alpha. But Blizzard, for some reason, thought that, oh, well, the players don't see the entire system. They're not playing the same game that we're playing, so it's not going to be like that in the actual game, and they're going to understand it. They don't like it because they don't understand it. That's basically what they're saying here, is we don't know what we want. They're telling us what we want. This is ridiculous. I'm... It's ridiculous. Let me finish the rest of this. And your feedback essentially that Profesco and Weeks will be doing numerical tuning, making changes to underlying ability designs when needed, and potentially leveraging Covenant-specific conduits if a Covenant needs some targeted shoring up to ensure that they're viable in a particular type of content. As our combat team shifts its focus primarily towards tuning, we'll be rolling these changes out to beta servers as soon as possible for further testing and iteration. PvP itemization. This is also important. We'll talk about Covenants in a minute. We have been following the constructive feedback about the range of gear available from the PvP vendors, and we agree with the underlying concerns. While WoW is an interconnected ecosystem on different content and systems that we feel are the very strongest characters should be the ones who participate and excel in a wide range of activities, I agree. Each individual progression path should offer the majority of the tools required to succeed in that path. Very true. The current PvP vendors fall short of that goal. We are considering a few different solutions, such as reworking the stat coverage on the vendor gear and/or providing PvP specific bonuses through those items. As soon as we've settled on a direction, we'll share our plan for feedback and get the changes up on beta for testing. Thank fucking God. Thank you, Blizzard. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Like, Covenants, let's talk about that later. But with this, thank you guys so much. This is exactly what we want to hear. And please just work with us, the community, and we will try to work with you and be as constructive as possible. Thank you guys so much. I think that you should go with a PvP specific stat because I think that would allow you to balance the gear's item levels in a way that would be more fair, and it would still allow people to use the gear interchangeably, but it still wouldn't compete with each other directly in the same way that it does now. That's what I think. Whatever Blizzard comes up with, we'll look at it then. And so anyway, let's go over here. Sockets. While we eliminated Warforging and Titanforging in Shadowlands, the goal of increasing clarity and player agency over rewards and the question of how to handle sockets was not quite as clear-cut. A certain critical mass of sockets across all player gear is essential to support jewel crafting as a player profession, and to recent expansions, a chance for any endgame item to upgrade to a socketed version gave players of all player styles the opportunity to interact with the jewel crafting trade skill. At the same time, sockets unquestionably constitute power, and they can be every bit as impactful as Warforging. Well, yeah, and in PvP, they make you do less damage. Trying to balance these considerations, the approach that we've settled on for Shadowlands is to keep sockets as a random item property, but to allow players to add sockets to their items via a consumable sold by Venari and the Maw, similar to gouged eyes. This way, all players can take advantage of gems, and seeing a socketed item drop offers a short-term efficiency advantage, but the long-term competitive players can still make steady progress towards best in slot without relying on an additional layer of randomness. This is great. I'm very happy. This is exactly what I wanted to hear. Like, I thought the gouged eyes of N'Zoth were great. I think that the problem is that, like, there's a time-gated source of them, and because you get gear regularly, it's kind of annoying. So it's a little bit more nuanced than that. But in general, I'm very happy with this. This is a great change, and I'm very satisfied with what they're doing here. This is a great decision, and I hope that they continue making decisions like this. They should just make it a rep system. Well, we'll see. Let's see the rest of these. Finally, in order to limit the total impact of gems, the power gap between players with full sockets and those without, in Shadowlands, only helms, rings, necks, bracers, and belts can have a socket randomly generated or added by Venari. These changes should be active. Okay, so no gloves? I don't know why. That seems kind of unnecessary. I'd like it if the sockets were easier to get, but you could put 3 of them in every single piece of gear. Just like the old days. Like, you could put 1 of them in, like, let's say you could put 3 of them in, like, your helmet, your chest, and your legs. You could put 2 of them in, like, your gloves and your shoulders. And you could put 1 of them in, like, your belt, your bracers, and your rings. Like, I think that'd be really cool. Or, like, maybe have, like, 3 in your weapons, too. Or, like, a meta socket in your helmet or something like that. Like, I don't know. Like, I'd like to see gearing be more interesting. I feel like gearing's really boring right now. And it's one of the negatives about the game, I would say. I don't know. Good idea. Yeah, I'd like that a lot, personally. I think that'd be really cool. So, let's look at the rest of this. One thing above all topics have in common is that they've been driven by your passionate feedback throughout the development process, which has helped shape the game for the better over the course of the past year. And a special thanks to all the testers reporting bugs on beta. We've already fixed thousands of issues based off of your reports, and are continuing to work through these reports, and we aim to make Shadowlands the best experience it can possibly be. Okay, we're not a good experience, but the best that it can be. You know, and at this point, it's a little bit, it's less than 2 months. It's the best that it can be. Yeah, it could possibly be. Let's be real, dude. Okay, yeah, they really tried. How is gearing boring? We have diminishing returns and secondary stats now, so there's always an element of surprise which piece of gear is best for you. Yeah, I don't like that either. So let's see here. Let's talk, all right, so let's talk positives and negatives about this, okay? So alt leveling, great. Introducing 9.2, fine. Torghast progression, this is great. Covenants, this is terrible. This is what we're going to talk about the most. PvP itemization, this is great. Sockets, this is great. Making them only available in certain slots, I don't really... I don't like this. I don't know why, but I don't really care a whole lot. It's not a big deal to me. So I'm not going to get too far into that regardless. I mean, like, trinkets never used to have sockets back in the day either, except for, like, special ones. So this isn't something that's, like, completely unique. Like, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. So I'm not going to complain about this or whatever. And I also want to say, like, this is great. Like, I'm so happy to hear the PvP itemization part. This is fucking amazing. The sockets is also great. I love hearing this. In terms of the Torghast progression, this is also great. Accurate tweet regarding the post. Let me see this. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you get got. That's what they say. That is what they say. So let's see here. Well, only for covenants. Yeah, only for covenants. Now, the week-long cooldown. I think if they want you to be 1 covenant per week, I would not completely hate that. And I would be more okay with that. But here's what my problem is with covenants. It's not that bad. You're right. It's not that bad. I don't feel like we should have to compromise with Blizzard in terms of making the game fun. It seems so counterproductive and counterintuitive that we have to compromise with Blizzard. Like, oh, we'll only make the game this unfun and I'll be happy. It doesn't make any sense. I don't like it. Forcing you to play the game that way, the way they want, and that's anti-natural behavior for players. Well, of course it is. Of course it is. What's the point of covenants? Wait, what's this here? Point of covenants if we can change them so easily? For the cool buffs and like the RP stuff. Like, there's nothing that makes covenants less cool if you can change them. Like, I at least in my mind. Like, there's nothing in my mind that tells me the covenant choices and the covenants you can be part of are less cool because I can change them. Like, maybe this is like my own perspective on the narrative, and other people can disagree with this, but that's what I think. I personally don't think that it makes a big difference. Like, it's the same as like going to different reputation vendors, or having your class order halls for your different characters. Like, I don't know, like, or having different artifact weapons. Like, if you were only able to have one artifact weapon at a time, I would think that was equally terrible too. Having all 3 of my artifact weapons was cool. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, I don't like it. And Covenant should be a cosmetic choice. I don't want to change covenants. I just want to be able to change the abilities. It's actually a really good insight, because you're totally right with what you're saying, man. Is like, yeah, nobody really cares about the covenants. We care about the abilities. So yeah, like that's the fundamental thing. Like, the abilities and the soul binds, like, that's what matters. Like, the rest of the shit is like, who gives a fuck? You know what I mean? But this right here, I'm gonna read a few comments and a little bit of feedback for this, and then I'll give myself 5 or 10 minutes to do this, and then I do really want to start this back in, okay? Development update. Okay, here we go. If there's a lesson to be learned from BFA and Shadowlands, it's this. Don't confuse interesting with fun. No, that's pretty good. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Let's see here. I'm going to read what the people's comments are. That's just about the PvP gearing system. Covenant abilities will never feel relevant in all content and be balanced at the same time. I really struggle to see how this tuning can address a fundamental design with some abilities. Yeah, they don't. I don't know what they're thinking. Like, I really don't at all. Let's see here. Like, it's just, it makes no fucking sense, man. It really makes zero fucking sense. There's no consequence. There's no weight to the choice. However, you're right that there isn't a difference from RP or stat-wise. Well, the thing is, like, what about people that don't want to have the consequence added to their game because they want to be able to play their characters in the optimum way, and they don't want to have to know going into content that they're being at a disadvantage? Like, I feel like that's something that, like, players don't want. And at a certain point, like, these are, then don't play? Well, you're right. And I think that's what people will choose to do. But the thing is that at a certain point, whenever the game's vision diverges so much from what the players want to see, then I think that there needs to be some way where the two groups can reconcile. And I don't think they're doing that as much. Nice up there. Does everyone switch their class? Why we walk to a different character? Because the class has been it's been a formational aspect of the game for 15 years. It's like, you can't compare like a 15-year-old game system that everybody is used to and has been using forever to this new system. And like, why is it that just because one complication exists, this rationalizes adding a second complication? How does that make any sense? Just because classes are imbalanced, that means that we should add another imbalance? What does that mean? I completely disagree with that. I don't know, man. It's funny because how dedicated they are to the ridiculous amount of dev time. Yeah, this is here. I want to read this too. It's funny how they're so dedicated to the ridiculous amount of time, ridiculous amount of dev time required to balance Covenant abilities across all specs, when allowing us to freely switch to all 4 Covenant abilities would still be aesthetically tied to one Covenant, would be an easier solution. Not only would it be an easier solution, but it would free up more of their development time to actually make the game better. Like, and like, this is something that make the choice 5. Why would anyone want to swap 5 times a week? Well, if they want to do PvP and then they want to raid, or they want to solo, you know, they just want to be able to swap around. Since they added faction swapping, don't you think it's less meaningful to be an alliance or a horde player now? Yeah, I don't think they should have done faction swapping at all. But the reason for that is because the factions can't play with each other. If the factions could play with each other, it wouldn't matter. The reason why faction swapping is an issue, and the reason why covenant swapping isn't an issue, are fundamentally different. They're fundamentally, it would be the difference, like, it would be the same thing if you were not able to, if you were Kyrian and you wouldn't be able to play with Vintir, for example. Yeah, these are fundamentally different. So let's see here. It didn't start for me to hear. I think most players understand what Blizzard wants to do with covenants. However, just looking into it from a baseline decision, it doesn't work. If Blizzard can get them within a small window of balance, it would be fine. But history has shown otherwise. Between soulbinds, conduits, covenant ability, class ability, there's too much to balance. Ian is already saying that there's too much changing between fights. Yeah, your team made it this way. Why do we need all these different systems on top of each other? I don't like changing a million things between each fight as much as the next person, but guess what? You made it this way. Yeah, I think that's also one of the things, right? Is whenever they lament the terrible systems in the game that they created. Like, oh yeah, the Azerite respecs are so high. What the fuck are you talking about? Then just go log on and change them. What the fuck do you mean? Oh no, they're so high. At the same time, every ability patch after release will have so much negativity because you cannot switch abilities. Yeah, because it's just they're basically programming, they're programming in disparity between players. And like, why would anybody want them to program disparity between players? Like, who watches this and thinks to themselves, oh wow, I'm so glad they're doing this thing to make my character artificially weaker than another character in certain situations because of some sort of narrative decision choice that you guys made while you were all sitting home because of coronavirus. Like, you're sitting at home on fucking Zoom meetings coming up with these cool ideas that sound really good, and then the moment that the player base sees them, everybody pokes holes in it and they just ignore it and they keep going forward. I'm pissed. Am I big mad? Yes, I'm big mad. I am big mad. Yes, I am. I'm big mad. Because make RPG games, the thing is, like, you just can't, here's the problem, is that they're designing this game, I need to kill her actually for a special dagger. They're designing the game right now. What they're doing, I believe, is that they're designing it in a way that makes sense for a single player game. And they're not taking into consideration the player base that they have. That's what I think the problem is. And you're right, there's going to be a lot of people who think that it's cool that you get to pick a covenant. But those people would think that it was cool that you get to swap your abilities too. It's not like, oh, they would hate that and like being forced into a covenant. You're comparing a neutral effect to a negative one. I don't know, man. What do you guys think? Who gives a fuck about choices and everything? I don't, dude. I'm so fucking sick of this shit. Like, at the end of the day, here's what the reality is. We're gonna play the game. Like, we're gonna play the game. We're gonna bitch about it every day. And eventually it'll probably get changed. Right? And like, the thing is that Blizzard is they're so intent on this that they're just going to do it no matter what the players say. Like, no matter how many logical fucking conclusions you come to, they're still going to fucking fall back on this idealist perspective that they have that's contrary to everything that players want to see. Your enjoyment, not people's? Well, you're right. I mean, but I think that I do speak for a lot of people here, because if you read a lot of the common feedback here, a lot of the people that are saying this kind of stuff and a lot of the people that are giving feedback, it is overwhelmingly negative. And that's just a reality. The reality that I've seen is that the overwhelming amount of feedback that Blizzard has gotten from Covenants has been negative in terms of switching abilities. Like, most people, it seems like, do not want to see this. And I think that it's completely disingenuous to invent some imaginary silent majority that actually agrees with everything that Blizzard is saying. It's completely disingenuous, and I don't think it's true. It's completely unsubstantiated. It's the same thing that whenever people are saying that WoD was bad, and you had Blizzard apologists saying that it wasn't bad, it's just the vocal minority, and then the subs went down so much that Blizzard stopped reporting them. Because oftentimes these people that are giving feedback are also speaking for the people who aren't. Like, it's just, exactly, yeah. Like, these are like completely logically inconsistent, like, opinions to have. And that's what I think. I mean, Echo Chamber, though, I personally think these good decisions are good on Blizzard's part for RP. I don't think anybody's disagreeing with the RP perspective of these decisions. The decisions undoubtedly increase the RP of the game, but is increasing the RP at the game at the expense of decreasing the enjoyment of being able to play the game competitively or at a high level or in the way that players want? Is that worth it? That's the conversation. I don't know, dude. Like, I don't think it is. It's an RPG, but it's also an MMO. I feel like this decision is... It makes sense for an RPG, but it doesn't make sense for an MMO. That's my perspective around it. Alduran Scryer and TBC. Alduran... So, here, I think Preach made the best analogy for the comparison that people draw between Alduran Scryer and the Covenants. Alduran Scryer... Covenants and TBC would be like a rogue deciding to have to pick between Shadow Step and Cloak of Shadows. Like, you could only pick one or the other if you went Alduran Scryers. I think that decision would have been met completely differently than if it was just a couple of stats of critical strike and attack power. Now, these are entirely different abilities. It's very, very different than what you're talking about.